The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, sending up a cloud of red dust that settled on Zelda Vaughn's already travel-worn dress like a second skin. She pressed her hand against the window, peering out at Alpine, Texas, a town that looked more like a collection of sun-bleached wooden buildings scattered across an endless stretch of desert than the prosperous settlement described in Quincy Patterson's letters. The year was 1879, and she had just traveled over 1,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she had never met, carrying with her 3 carpetbags, a King James Bible, and a secret that made her stomach twist with anxiety. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand to help her down. Her boots touched the dusty street, and immediately the June heat wrapped around her like a woolen blanket. She had never experienced such relentless sunshine, such dry air that seemed to pull the moisture from her very lungs. Back in Boston, even the hottest summer days held a dampness, a hint of the Atlantic. Here, everything felt sharp and unforgiving. "Miss Vaughn." A deep voice cut through her observations, and she turned to see a tall man approaching from the shade of the general store's awning. He was broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly at the collar of his worn cotton shirt, and his eyes, an unexpected shade of green, studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. A hat dangled from his hand, and dust covered his boots and the lower portion of his trousers. This had to be Quincy Patterson. "Mr. Patterson." Her voice came out steadier than she felt, refined Boston accent clearly marking her as an outsider in this dusty frontier town. He stepped closer, and a smile broke across his face, transforming his serious expression into something warmer. "Call me Quincy, please. We're to be married, after all. No sense standing on formality." He gestured to the 3 bags the driver had deposited on the wooden walkway. "These all yours?" "Yes. I tried to bring only necessities, but it seemed impossible to narrow it down further." She watched as he effortlessly lifted 2 of the bags, leaving her to carry the smallest. The ease with which he moved despite the burden spoke of strength earned through hard work, not idle leisure. "My wagon's just down the street. Ranch is about 5 miles west of town. It is not much, but it is home." He started walking, and she hurried to keep pace, her long skirts collecting dust with each step. "I hope the journey was not too difficult." "I know, coming from Boston, this must all seem mighty different." "Different does not begin to describe it," she admitted, looking around at the scattered buildings. A saloon stood across the street, its doors already open despite the early afternoon hour. Further down, she could see a church steeple, a livery stable, and what appeared to be a small schoolhouse. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the brilliant blue sky. "But I made a promise in my letters, and I intend to keep it." He loaded her bags into the back of a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, then helped her onto the seat. His hands were calloused and warm, gentle despite their obvious strength. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, she studied his profile, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the carefully worded letters she had received over the past 6 months. Their correspondence had begun through an advertisement placed by Quincy's sister, who lived in Denver and apparently worried about her bachelor brother living alone on his ranch. The letters had been polite, informative, even kind, but they had revealed little of the man himself beyond the basics. He was 26 years old, owned a cattle ranch, had no family nearby since his parents had passed, and needed a wife to help build a life. She had responded honestly about most things. She was 23, orphaned when fever took her parents and younger brother 5 years ago, working as a seamstress to support herself, and longing for something more than the narrow room she rented above a tailor shop. But she had not been honest about everything. The wagon rolled through town, and several people waved or called greetings to Quincy. He responded warmly, clearly well-liked in the community. As they left the buildings behind and headed into the open range, the landscape stretched endlessly in all directions. She had never seen so much empty space, so much sky. It made her feel simultaneously insignificant and oddly liberated. "I should probably tell you," Quincy said after several minutes of silence, "that the ranch keeps me busy most days. I have about 200 head of cattle, a dozen horses, some chickens. During roundup and branding, it gets even busier. I do not expect you to help with the livestock, but running the house, that will be your domain. I have been managing on my own these past 3 years, since my mother passed, but I will admit things have gotten pretty rough around the edges." Her stomach clenched. This was it, the moment she had been dreading since she boarded the train in Boston. "Quincy, I need to tell you something. I should have mentioned it in my letters, but I was afraid if I did, you would not want me to come." He glanced at her, those green eyes curious but not unkind. "Well, you are here now. Whatever it is, we will figure it out." She took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. "I cannot cook. Well, I can boil water and make tea, and I managed to learn how to fry an egg without burning it completely, but anything beyond that is a disaster. I tried, truly I did. My landlady in Boston attempted to teach me several times, but I am hopeless. I burn everything, or it comes out raw in the middle, or it simply tastes awful. And baking, that is even worse. The last time I tried to make bread, it came out so hard my landlady said we could use it as a doorstop." She forced herself to look at him, expecting anger or disappointment. Instead, she watched as his serious expression cracked, and then he laughed. It was a genuine, full-bodied laugh that made his shoulders shake and brought tears to the corners of his eyes. He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully, still chuckling. "Is that all? Here I was thinking you were about to confess to some terrible crime, or that you were already married, or something truly catastrophic." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Good thing I can cook, then." She stared at him in disbelief. "You can cook?" "Have been doing it for myself for 3 years now. Before that, my mother taught me, said every person should know how to feed themselves regardless of whether they are male or female. When she got sick, I took over most of the cooking anyway, so she could rest. I am no fancy chef, but I can make a decent stew, fry up a steak, bake bread and biscuits, even manage a pie now and then, though my crusts tend to be a bit thick." Relief flooded through her so intensely that tears pricked at her eyes. "I was so worried. All the way here, I kept thinking you would send me straight back to Boston as soon as you found out." He reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "Zelda, I did not ask you to come all this way to be my cook. I asked you to come to be my wife, my partner. We will figure out the rest together. Maybe you can learn eventually, or maybe you will find other ways to contribute. A ranch has plenty of work to go around." The sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his touch, made something loosen in her chest. Perhaps this arrangement would work after all. "I am good with a needle," she offered. "I can mend anything, make clothes, even do embroidery. And I managed my own finances for 5 years, so I am decent with numbers and record keeping. I am also a hard worker, even if I cannot cook. See, plenty of ways to contribute. My mending has been piling up for months. I am wearing socks with more holes than fabric." He clicked his tongue and got the horses moving again. "Besides, being out here, it gets lonely. Having someone to talk to share the days with, that matters more than perfect meals." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking rhythmically, the horses' hooves clopping against the hard, packed earth. The land rolled gently, covered in hardy grasses and dotted with mesquite and juniper. In the distance, she could see dark shapes that must be cattle. "Tell me about Boston," Quincy said. "I have never been further east than San Antonio." So she told him about the crowded streets, the harbor with its forest of ship masts, the grand buildings and narrow alleys, the constant noise and motion. She told him about her work as a seamstress, sitting in a stuffy room hour after hour, her fingers cramping as she sewed endless seams for wealthy women who barely acknowledged her existence. She told him about her tiny room with its single window overlooking a brick wall, about eating cold meals alone because she had no kitchen privileges and could not afford restaurants. "It sounds lonely," he observed. "It was," she admitted. "After my family died, I had no one. A few acquaintances at work, but no real friends. My parents had been immigrants from England, so we had no extended family in America. When I saw your sister's advertisement, something about it called to me. The idea of starting fresh, of building something new. It was frightening, but staying in Boston felt like slowly suffocating." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know something about loneliness. This land, it is beautiful, but it is hard too. After my parents passed, my sister tried to convince me to sell the ranch and move to Denver, but this place, it is in my blood. My father built it from nothing, and I could not let it go. But coming home to an empty house every night, eating meals in silence, it wears on a person." The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. The house was a sturdy wooden structure, larger than she had expected, with a covered porch running along the front. Nearby stood a barn, several outbuildings, and a corral where horses milled about. It was isolated, certainly, but there was something appealing about it too, something honest and unpretentious. Quincy helped her down from the wagon and carried her bags inside. The front door opened into a main room that served as both sitting area and dining space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and she could see a kitchen area beyond, complete with a cast iron stove. Doors led off to what must be bedrooms. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean, if a bit sparse on decoration. "I did my best to tidy up before coming to fetch you," Quincy said, sounding almost apologetic. "The bedroom on the right is mine. The one on the left I figured you could use until we are married. I know we have a wedding planned for tomorrow, but I wanted you to have your own space until then. Reverend Michaels is expecting us at the church at 10 o'clock, if that suits you." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. She had not known what to expect, had worried perhaps that he would expect immediate intimacy, but he was giving her time to adjust. "That is very considerate." "Thank you." He set her bags in the left bedroom, a cozy space with a double bed covered in a faded quilt, a wardrobe, and a small table with a pitcher and basin. A window looked out over the ranch, offering a view of the mountains beyond. "I will let you get settled," Quincy said from the doorway. "I need to check on the cattle and take care of some chores, but I will be back in a few hours to start supper. Make yourself at home. There is water in the pump by the kitchen, and feel free to explore." After he left, she sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The journey had taken nearly 2 weeks, with countless train changes, uncomfortable seats, strange hotels, and finally that long stagecoach ride from Fort Stockton. Her body ached, her dress was filthy, and she smelled of sweat and dust. But beneath the exhaustion, she felt something else, a fragile hope. She unpacked her bags, hanging her 2 other dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the table. She had a small photograph of her parents and brother in a silver frame, a few books, her sewing kit, and the letters from Quincy tied with a ribbon. Looking at them now, she realized how little they had really revealed. Everything important she was learning only now. Using the water from the pitcher, she washed as best she could, scrubbing away the travel grime and changing into her cleanest dress, a simple gray cotton that had seen better days. She brushed out her long dark hair and repinned it, then ventured back into the main room. The house was quiet except for the ticking of a clock on the mantel and the occasional creak of settling wood. She explored slowly, noting the details that revealed the life Quincy led. A pair of worn boots by the door, neatly placed. Books on a shelf, their spines creased from repeated reading, titles ranging from practical guides to ranching to novels by Dickens and Twain. A photograph on the mantel showed a stern-faced couple, the woman seated, the man standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder. Quincy's parents, she assumed. In the kitchen, she found everything organized with surprising efficiency. Pots and pans hung from hooks, dry goods were stored in labeled jars, and a box of vegetables sat near the stove. She had expected bachelor chaos, but Quincy clearly knew how to manage a household. The sound of the front door opening made her turn. Quincy entered, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg. He had rolled up his sleeves, revealing tanned forearms, and there was a smudge of dirt on his cheek. "Everything all right?" he asked, moving to the kitchen and pumping water into a basin to wash his hands. "Yes, I was just looking around. You keep a very tidy house." He shrugged. "Necessity. If I did not stay organized, things would fall apart pretty quickly out here. Living alone teaches you that." He dried his hands on a towel and began pulling items from the shelves. "I thought I would make stew tonight. It is simple but filling." She watched as he worked, fascinated. He moved with confidence, chopping vegetables with quick, efficient strokes, cutting beef into cubes, adding everything to a large pot with water and seasonings. There was no hesitation, no referring to recipes. He simply knew what to do. "Can I help with anything?" she asked, feeling useless. "Can you set the table? Plates are in that cabinet, silverware in the drawer below." She did as instructed, glad to have something to contribute. As she laid out 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 knives, it struck her how domestic the scene was. Tomorrow they would be married, and this would be her life. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. While the stew simmered, Quincy pulled out a bowl of dough that had apparently been rising while he worked outside. "I started this morning," he explained, shaping it into a loaf and placing it in a pan. "It should bake up nice to go with the stew." The smell of baking bread gradually filled the house, homey and comforting. Zelda found herself relaxing, the anxiety that had been her constant companion for weeks beginning to ease. As the sun lowered in the sky, painting the room in golden light, they sat at the table and shared their first meal together. The stew was delicious, rich and savory, and the bread was perfect, crusty on the outside and soft within. Zelda could not remember the last time she had eaten something so satisfying. "This is wonderful," she said sincerely. "You are not exaggerating about your cooking skills. My mother was a good teacher." He broke off another piece of bread. "She used to say that cooking was an act of love, a way of caring for people. I think of her every time I make her recipes. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was. Strong, practical, but kind too. She would have liked you." He met her eyes across the table. "She always said I should marry someone with substance, someone who was not afraid of hard work or challenges. When my sister suggested the advertisement, I was skeptical, but your letters, they showed me who you are. Honest, capable, willing to take risks for something better. Those are qualities that matter out here." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Zelda listened to the sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted somewhere nearby, cattle lowed in the distance, and the wind whispered through the eaves. It was so different from Boston's constant urban noise, but she found it peaceful rather than unsettling. Tomorrow she would become Zelda Patterson, wife to a man she barely knew. But already, in just these few hours, she felt more hopeful about the future than she had in years. Perhaps, just perhaps, this gamble would pay off. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and hot. Zelda woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She washed carefully, then put on her best dress, a deep blue silk that she had made herself. It was the finest thing she owned, saved for special occasions that had rarely come in Boston. She arranged her hair in a soft bun at the nape of her neck and wished, not for the first time, that she had something nicer to wear, something that befitted a wedding. When she emerged from her room, she found Quincy already dressed in clean trousers and a pressed white shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He looked different, more formal and undeniably handsome. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. You look very nice as well." They ate a quick breakfast of leftover bread and eggs, both too nervous to manage much conversation. Then Quincy hitched the wagon again, and they made the journey back into Alpine. The church was a small white building with a simple cross on top. Reverend Michaels waited inside, a kindly older man with spectacles and a gentle manner. 2 witnesses had been arranged, the proprietor of the general store and his wife, both of whom greeted Zelda warmly. The ceremony was brief and simple. They stood before the reverend and repeated their vows, promising to love and honor each other. When Quincy slid a simple gold band onto her finger, Zelda felt the weight of what they were doing settle over her. This was real. She was truly marrying this man, binding her life to his. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Michaels said with a smile. Quincy leaned down, his eyes questioning, giving her the chance to turn away if she wanted. Instead, she lifted her face, and his lips met hers in a gentle, chaste kiss that nevertheless sent warmth spreading through her body. Afterward, they signed the marriage certificate, and just like that, it was done. She was Mrs. Quincy Patterson, wife to a Texas rancher, mistress of a home 5 miles from the nearest town. The general store proprietor, a jovial man named Donald Sutherland, insisted on buying them lunch at the small restaurant next to his store. They sat around a scarred wooden table and ate fried chicken and biscuits while the Sutherlands told stories about Alpine's history and various townspeople. It was clear they were trying to make Zelda feel welcome, and she appreciated the effort. "You will need to come to the church social next month," Mrs. Sutherland said. She was a plump, friendly woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. "All the ladies will want to meet you. We do not get many newcomers out here." "I would like that," Zelda said, meaning it. The prospect of making friends, of having a community, appealed to her. On the ride back to the ranch, the reality of their situation seemed to settle over both of them. They were married now, truly husband and wife. The separate bedrooms that had seemed reasonable yesterday now felt awkward. As if reading her thoughts, Quincy said quietly, "I want you to know I am not going to pressure you into anything. I know this is all new and strange. We can take our time getting to know each other properly." She looked at him, this man who continued to surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I appreciate that. Though I hope you know I did not come all this way expecting a marriage in name only. I would like us to be friends first, if that makes sense." "It makes perfect sense." He smiled at her. "Tell you what, why do not you show me some of what you can do with that sewing expertise? I have a pile of mending that has been staring at me accusingly for months." The afternoon passed pleasantly. Quincy brought out an enormous basket of clothes with torn seams, missing buttons, and holes worn through from hard use. Zelda set up in the main room with her sewing kit and worked through the pile while Quincy caught up on paperwork at the table, recording cattle tallies and expenses in a leather-bound ledger. They talked as they worked, sharing stories from their pasts. Quincy told her about growing up on the ranch, learning to ride before he could properly walk, helping his father with the cattle drives. He spoke of the challenges of running a ranch in such unforgiving country, the constant worry about drought and disease, predators and thieves. She told him more about Boston, about the sewing shop where she had worked, the exacting standards of the owner, the wealthy clients who treated the seamstresses like furniture. She told him about her family, how her father had worked as a clerk, how her mother had taken in laundry to make ends meet, how her little brother had dreamed of becoming a doctor before the fever took him at just 13. "You have had your share of hardship," Quincy observed. "No more than most people, I suppose. Life is hard everywhere, just in different ways." She bit off a thread and held up a shirt she had just repaired. "But I am grateful to be here now to have this chance at something different." That evening, Quincy made chicken and dumplings, another of his mother's recipes. They ate on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The temperature dropped rapidly after dark, going from oppressively hot to almost cool. Zelda shivered in her thin dress, and Quincy disappeared inside, returning with a blanket that he draped over her shoulders. "The temperature swings take some getting used to," he said, settling back into his chair. "Hot as blazes during the day, cold at night. Not much moisture in the air to hold the heat." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. There were so many, more than Zelda had ever seen in Boston, where gas lamps and coal smoke obscured the night sky. Here, the Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. "I have never seen anything so beautiful," she whispered. "It never gets old," Quincy agreed. "Some nights, when I cannot sleep, I come out here and just look up. Makes you realize how small we are, how much bigger the world is than our little problems." When they finally went inside, the awkwardness returned. They stood in the main room, both clearly uncertain. "Well," Zelda said, "I suppose I should turn in. Thank you for everything today, for being so patient and kind." Quincy stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Zelda, I know we are still getting to know each other, but I want you to know I am glad you are here. I think we are going to do just fine together." On impulse, she rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. "I think so too. Good night, Quincy." She went to her room, but she did not sleep for a long time. Instead, she lay in bed, listening to Quincy moving around the house, the sound of him preparing for bed in his own room. She thought about the strange turns life took, how she had gone from despairing seamstress to ranch wife in the span of a few months. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Zelda threw herself into learning the rhythms of ranch life. While Quincy worked with the cattle and horses, she took over the household tasks she could manage. She became expert at laundry, scrubbing clothes in the large tub and hanging them to dry in the fierce sun. She kept the house clean, learning to sweep constantly as the desert seemed determined to reclaim the interior. She tended the small vegetable garden behind the house, weeding and watering in the early morning before the heat became unbearable, and she continued to sew. Word spread through Alpine about her skills, and soon neighbors were bringing mending and requests for new garments. She was happy to take on the work, both for the bit of income and for the connection to other people. Each client brought news and gossip, slowly helping her understand the community she had joined. Quincy continued to handle all the cooking, and Zelda tried not to feel guilty about it. She made a few attempts to help, but they always ended in disaster. The one time she tried to surprise him with breakfast, she burned the bacon so badly that the smell lingered for days, and the eggs were simultaneously runny and scorched. He had laughed it off, but she had felt terrible. "Truly, it does not bother me," he assured her one evening as he prepared dinner. "I actually enjoy cooking. It is meditative, gives me time to think, and you contribute in so many other ways. The house has never been cleaner, my clothes have never been in better repair, and that money you are bringing in from sewing, that helps." But it was more than just the division of labor that was working. They were becoming friends, real friends, sharing their days over meals, talking late into the evening about everything and nothing. Quincy had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, and she found herself laughing more than she had in years. He was intelligent, too, well-read despite his isolated life, and they spent many evenings reading aloud to each other. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, friendship began to deepen into something more. Zelda found herself watching Quincy as he worked, admiring the strength of his body, the competence with which he handled every task. She noticed small things, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he handled the animals, the sound of his voice in the morning. He seemed similarly affected. She caught him looking at her sometimes with an expression that made her heart race. When he helped her down from the wagon or their hands accidentally touched reaching for the same thing, the contact seemed to linger longer than necessary. One evening, about a month after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch after dinner. The sun had just set and the first stars were appearing. Quincy reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Zelda, I have been thinking about our arrangement." Her heart jumped. "Oh, when I asked you to come here, I thought I just needed a wife in the practical sense, someone to help run the household, to share the burdens of ranch life. But getting to know you these past weeks, I realize I want more than that. I have developed real feelings for you. You are not just my wife in name, you have become dear to me." She turned to face him fully, her heart pounding. "I feel the same way. I did not expect it to happen so quickly, but Quincy, I think I am falling in love with you." The smile that broke across his face was radiant. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I have been trying to be patient, to give you space, but it has been difficult. Every night going to our separate rooms, it has been getting harder and harder." "I know," she whispered. "For me too." He stood, drawing her up with him. "Zelda Patterson, would you do me the honor of truly becoming my wife? Not just in name, but in every sense." In answer, she stepped into his arms and kissed him. Unlike their chaste wedding kiss, this was deep and passionate, weeks of restrained attraction finally unleashed. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted against him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will take that as a yes." That night, she did not sleep in the spare room. She moved into Quincy's room, into their room, and they consummated their marriage properly. It was tender and passionate, awkward in moments as they learned each other, but wonderful. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Zelda felt a contentment she had never known existed. "I love you," Quincy murmured into her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back, and meant it with her whole heart. Summer deepened into fall. The brutal heat eased slightly, though it was still far warmer than any Boston autumn. Zelda attended the church social that Mrs. Sutherland had mentioned and found herself welcomed into the community of ranch wives. They were a hardy bunch, these women of the frontier, practical and strong, and she learned much from them about surviving in this harsh land. She also discovered she was not the only one who could not cook. At least 3 of the women confessed similar deficiencies, much to her relief. "My husband handles the cooking too," one woman named Martha said with a laugh. "He is just better at it, and we both accepted that years ago. Do not let anyone tell you there is only one way for a marriage to work." Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Quincy worked the ranch, often from dawn until dusk. Zelda managed the house and her growing sewing business. In the evenings they came together, sharing meals and conversation, growing ever closer. In October, Quincy's sister Sarah arrived for a visit. She was a whirlwind of energy, full of questions and opinions, clearly determined to assess whether her matchmaking had been successful. But she warmed to Zelda almost immediately, and by the end of her week-long stay, the two women had become friends. "I can see how happy you have made him," Sarah said to Zelda the night before she was to return to Denver. "I have not seen my brother smile this much since before our parents died. Thank you for taking a chance on him." "He has made me happy too," Zelda said simply. "More than I ever thought possible." Winter came, and with it new challenges. A cold snap in December killed several head of cattle and destroyed much of the vegetable garden. Supplies ran low, and they made fewer trips to town as the weather turned unpredictable. But huddled together in the house, keeping warm by the fire, Zelda found she did not mind the isolation. She had everything she needed right here. It was in January that she began to suspect she was pregnant. Her monthly courses stopped, and she felt nauseated in the mornings. At first she said nothing, wanting to be certain, but as the signs became unmistakable, she knew she had to tell Quincy. She chose a quiet evening after supper. He was reading by the fire and she was pretending to sew, her hands too shaky to make neat stitches. "Quincy, I need to tell you something." He looked up immediately, concern crossing his face. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, at least I hope you will not think so." She set down her sewing and went to sit beside him. "I am with child. I am fairly certain all the signs are there." For a moment he just stared at her. Then joy spread across his face and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." "Yes," she laughed, relief flooding through her. "Sometime in late summer, I think." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. "This is wonderful news. The best news. Are you happy about it?" "I am," she said, realizing it was true. The idea of having a child had been abstract before, but now, carrying Quincy's baby, she felt nothing but joy. "A bit frightened too. I do not know anything about being a mother." "We will learn together," he promised. "Just like everything else." He was true to his word. As Zelda's pregnancy progressed, he took over even more of the physical labor around the house, insisting she rest more. He read every book he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, determined to be prepared. His tenderness and concern made her love him even more. The baby came in late August during a thunderstorm, lightning illuminating the bedroom as Zelda labored. The midwife from Alpine, a capable woman named Mrs. Hendricks, coached her through the long hours. Quincy paced outside, forbidden from the room by propriety but clearly anxious. Finally, as dawn broke, Zelda heard the thin, reedy cry of her son. "Mrs." Hendricks cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him in Zelda's arms. He was tiny and perfect, with dark hair and Quincy's green eyes. "Can I come in?" Quincy's voice came from beyond the door, strained with worry and eagerness. "Yes," Zelda called, her own voice weak but happy. He burst into the room and froze at the sight of her holding the baby. Slowly he approached the bed, his expression one of wonder. "Is he all right? Are you all right?" "We are both fine. Come meet your son." Quincy sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face. "He is so small." "He will grow," Mrs. Hendricks said briskly, packing up her supplies. "He has healthy, good lungs on him. You did well, Mrs. Patterson. Now you need to rest. And you, Mr. Patterson, need to take care of your wife. I will check in tomorrow." After she left, Quincy gently took the baby, cradling him with surprising ease. "Hello, little one. I am your father. I am going to do my best by you, I promise." "What should we name him?" Zelda asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Quincy said, "What about Thomas? It was my father's name, Thomas Patterson." "Thomas," Zelda repeated, trying it out. "I like it. Thomas Quinn Patterson, Quinn for his father." Quincy's eyes grew bright with tears. "That is perfect." Little Thomas thrived, growing steadily under his parents' devoted care. To Zelda's surprise, Quincy was as comfortable with the baby as he was with everything else. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Thomas during his fussy periods, and was always ready to help in the middle of the night. "My mother always said that raising children was not just women's work," he explained when Zelda commented on it. "She made sure I knew how to care for babies, said I might need it someday, and she was right." The first year of Thomas's life flew by. The ranch continued to prosper, and Quincy hired a young ranch hand named Billy to help with the increased workload. Billy was 18, fresh from a ranch up north, eager to learn and prove himself. He built himself a small cabin on the far side of the property and took to ranch life naturally. With extra help, Quincy had more time to spend with his family. They took picnics out to the creek that ran through their property, the only reliable water source for miles. Thomas learned to crawl, then to walk, his determined personality showing early. He adored his father, always wanting to be wherever Quincy was, trying to help even when his help made tasks take twice as long. When Thomas was 2, Zelda found herself pregnant again. This time she recognized the signs immediately. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. In the spring, she gave birth to a daughter they named Emily Rose. She had Zelda's dark hair and a sweet, placid temperament that was the opposite of her rambunctious older brother. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The house was louder, messier, fuller. Zelda still could not cook, but she had mastered many other skills. She made all the children's clothes, kept meticulous records of the ranch's finances, and even learned to help with some of the lighter ranch work, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, tending the horses when they were in the corral. She and Quincy grew closer with each passing year, their initial attraction deepening into a profound love. They had their disagreements, of course. His tendency to work too hard and neglect his own needs frustrated her. Her stubborn insistence on doing everything herself when she clearly needed help frustrated him. But they always talked through their issues, never letting resentments fester. 5 years after Zelda had first arrived in Alpine, Texas, she stood on the porch watching Quincy teach Thomas, now 6, how to rope a fence post. Emily played nearby with a doll Zelda had sewn for her. The afternoon sun painted everything gold, and a gentle breeze provided some relief from the heat. "Mama, watch," Thomas shouted as his loop actually caught the post. "Wonderful job," she called back, applauding. Quincy caught her eye and grinned, that same smile that still made her heart flutter. He said something to Thomas, then handed him the rope and walked over to the porch. Wrapping his arms around her from behind, he rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different my life is now compared to 5 years ago. How much better." "Better." He turned her in his arms to face him. "You are sure? No regrets about leaving Boston, about taking a chance on a cowboy who needed a wife? Not one single regret," she said firmly. "Well, perhaps one very small one." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I still cannot cook," she said with a laugh. "I attempted biscuits last week while you were out on the range, thinking maybe I had finally gotten the hang of it. I had to bury the evidence before you got home." He threw back his head and laughed, that full, joyful sound she loved so much. "And here I thought the chickens had just been extra hungry that day. I found crumbs everywhere." She swatted his arm playfully. "You knew." "I know everything that happens around here, Mrs. Patterson, But as I said 5 years ago, good thing I can cook. Some things never need to change." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, a promise and a celebration all at once. When they broke apart, Thomas was making exaggerated gagging noises and Emily was giggling. "Come on, kids," Quincy called. "Time to feed the chickens before supper." "Can we have Papa's stew?" Thomas asked hopefully. "I think we can arrange that," Quincy said, ruffling his son's hair. As they all went about their evening chores, Zelda reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived as a mail-order bride, terrified of being rejected for her lack of cooking skills, uncertain about the future. She had found instead a partner who valued her for what she could do rather than punishing her for what she could not. She had found love, real and deep and lasting. She had found a home. That night, after the children were asleep and the supper dishes were washed, she and Quincy sat on the porch as they often did, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "I got a letter from Sarah today," Quincy said. "She is expecting her first child." "That is wonderful news. She and Michael have been hoping for a baby for so long. She says it is thanks to our example, seeing how happy we are with our family. She wants to know if you would consider coming to Denver when her time comes to help her through it." "Of course," Zelda said immediately. "Though I will have to bring Emily, she is too young to leave for that long." "I figured as much. Thomas and I will hold down the fort here. He is getting to be a pretty good helper." Quincy paused. "Zelda, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything. For taking a chance on me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." She tilted her head up to kiss him. "You have done the same for me. I was so lost in Boston, so lonely. Coming here, marrying you, it saved me." "We saved each other," he corrected. "That is what partners do." The years continued to unfold, each bringing its own joys and challenges. Another daughter arrived when Emily was 3, a spirited girl they named Catherine who had her father's green eyes and adventurous nature. Thomas grew into a capable young man, passionate about ranching like his father. Emily proved to have a gift for music, and Quincy bought her a piano from a family moving back east, hiring a teacher from Alpine to give her lessons. Catherine, true to her nature, wanted to be a cowgirl, insisting on learning to ride and rope alongside her brother. The ranch prospered under Quincy's management. He expanded the herd, bought more land, and built a reputation for producing quality cattle. Zelda's sewing business continued to provide extra income, and she had become known throughout the region for her skill. She had even begun designing her own patterns, creating dresses that adapted Eastern fashions to Western practicality. They faced hardships too. A drought one year nearly destroyed them, and they had to sell off part of the herd to survive. One terrible winter they lost Billy, the ranch hand who had become like family, to pneumonia despite everything they tried to save him. Emily suffered a bad fall from a horse and broke her arm, spending weeks in a cast and giving her parents gray hairs from worry. But through it all, they faced everything together, their love the foundation that held them steady. Quincy still cooked every meal, and Zelda still could not manage more than tea and toast without disaster. It had become something of a family joke, the children teasing their mother gently about her legendary inability to cook anything edible. "It is just as well," Thomas said one evening when he was 16. "If Mama could cook, we might not appreciate Papa's skills as much." "Exactly right," Quincy agreed, winking at Zelda. "Besides, your mother has plenty of other talents. How many ranchers have wives who can keep books like she does, or who bring in substantial income with their sewing? Not many, I would wager." On their 20th anniversary, Quincy surprised Zelda with a trip to San Antonio. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since their wedding, leaving the children under Thomas's capable supervision. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, and walked the streets hand in hand like young sweethearts. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Zelda asked as they stood on the banks of the San Antonio River one evening, watching the sun set. "Some days it feels like a lifetime, and other days it feels like just yesterday that I saw you step off that stagecoach, covered in dust and looking terrified," Quincy said. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I had no idea what I was getting into, but it turned out better than I could have dreamed." "You know what I remember most clearly from that day?" Quincy asked. "The moment you confessed you could not cook. You looked so worried, like you expected me to send you right back to Boston. And all I could think was how honest you were, how brave to take such a risk. I think I started falling in love with you right then." She leaned into him, her heart full. "I am so glad you laughed instead of getting angry." "How could I be angry? You were giving me permission to keep doing something I enjoyed anyway." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Zelda, these 20 years with you have been the best of my life. You are my partner in every sense of the word, my best friend, the love of my life. Thank you for saying yes to a lonely cowboy's proposal all those years ago." "Thank you for being the kind of man worth saying yes to," she replied, tears in her eyes. They returned to the ranch refreshed and more in love than ever. The children were growing up. Thomas, at 19, was practically running the ranch himself, having inherited his father's skill and dedication. Emily, at 16, had begun teaching piano to other children in Alpine, her sweet nature making her a beloved figure in the community. Catherine, at 13, was still insisting she would be a rancher like her father and brother, much to the amusement and pride of her parents. More years passed, bringing grandchildren. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and they had 4 children in quick succession. Emily married the new doctor in Alpine, a kind young man from Virginia, and they had twins. Even Catherine eventually settled down, though she never gave up her love of ranching, marrying a cowboy who worked on a ranch near Fort Stockton and helping him run the operation. Quincy and Zelda watched their family grow with joy and satisfaction. The ranch house, which had once felt too large for 2 people, was now always full of noise and activity when the grandchildren visited. The business continued to prosper, eventually passing primarily to Thomas's management, while Quincy took a less active role. On their 30th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and yard, 3 generations of Pattersons come together. A long table was set up outside, laden with food. Quincy had cooked for days preparing the feast, with help from daughters-in-law and grandchildren. As the sun set and the family gathered around the table, Thomas stood to make a toast. "To my parents, who showed all of us what a real partnership looks like. Mama, who could not cook but could do everything else. Papa, who could cook but who would be lost without Mama handling everything else. You 2 built something amazing here, not just a successful ranch, but a family filled with love. Thank you for the example you set." Everyone raised their glasses, and Zelda felt tears streaming down her face. Quincy squeezed her hand, his own eyes bright. Later, after the party had wound down and the guests had either gone home or settled into various beds and bedrolls around the property, Zelda and Quincy sat on their porch, the same place they had shared so many conversations over the years. 30 years, Zelda said wonderingly. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I never imagined this, all of this." "What did you imagine?" Quincy asked. "Survival, mostly. A roof over my head, food to eat, maybe companionship if I was lucky. I never dreamed of love like this, a family like this." She gestured at the house full of sleeping grandchildren. "You gave me everything I did not know I wanted." "You did the same for me," he said. "That day you confessed you could not cook, I laughed because it seemed so unimportant compared to everything else. And I was right. It was unimportant. What mattered was your honesty, your courage, your capacity for love. Those are the things that built this life we have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, the same stars that had amazed Zelda on her first night at the ranch. Some things had changed dramatically over 30 years. The ranch was larger, more prosperous. Alpine had grown, gaining a railroad connection and more amenities. They had gone from newlyweds to grandparents, but some things had not changed at all. Quincy still cooked every meal and Zelda still could not be trusted near a stove. More importantly, they still loved each other with the same depth and devotion that had grown from those early days of getting to know one another. If anything, their love had deepened, enriched by shared experiences, weathered trials, and mutual respect. As they finally stood to go inside, Quincy pulled Zelda into his arms one more time. "I love you, Mrs. Patterson, today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you too, Mr. Patterson, today, tomorrow, and always." They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together, just as they always had. The house was quiet now, filled with the gentle sounds of sleeping family, the legacy of a love that had started with an honest confession and a cowboy's laughter. In the bedroom they had shared for nearly 30 years, Zelda changed into her nightgown while Quincy extinguished the lamps. As they settled into bed, her head resting on his shoulder as it had countless nights before, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From lonely seamstress to beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. From a woman who could not cook to a woman who had helped build an empire, raised fine children, and found a love that would last a lifetime. "Quincy," she whispered into the darkness. "MMM. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had learned to cook? If I had been the perfect frontier wife who could do everything?" She felt him chuckle, the rumble traveling through his chest. "Then we would have missed out on a lot of good stories, and I would never have discovered how much I enjoy cooking. Everything happened exactly as it should have." She smiled, closing her eyes, feeling safe and loved and exactly where she belonged. He was right. Everything had happened exactly as it should have. Her inability to cook, which she had feared would be a fatal flaw, had instead become part of their unique story, a quirk that defined their partnership rather than diminishing it. The years continued their steady march forward. Quincy's hair went from dark to silver, and lines deepened around Zelda's eyes. Their hands grew gnarled with age, but they still reached for each other constantly, still sought each other's company above all others. They celebrated each anniversary, each birthday, each new grandchild and eventually great-grandchild. When Quincy's health began to fail in his 72nd year, Zelda nursed him with devoted care, just as he had cared for her through her own illnesses over the years. The children and grandchildren visited frequently, filling the house with life and noise, providing distraction and comfort. One evening, sitting by his bedside, Zelda held Quincy's hand and talked about their life together, reminding him of favorite memories. He was tired but alert, his green eyes still bright when he looked at her. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing a question they had asked each other many times over the years. "Not one," she said firmly. "Every moment with you has been a gift, even when I burned the biscuits that one time." He teased weakly. "That was once in 43 years. You are still a vastly better cook than I could ever hope to be." She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "Rest now, my love. I will be right here." But Quincy Patterson, true to his nature, defied the doctor's predictions and rallied. Within months, he was back on his feet, frailer than before but determined to enjoy whatever time remained. They celebrated their 45th anniversary surrounded by family, a massive gathering that filled not just their house but spilled out across the yard in tents and wagons. It was Zelda whose health failed next, a sudden stroke that left her weak and confused. Quincy cared for her with the same tenderness she had shown him, feeding her the meals he prepared, reading to her, sitting by her bedside for hours. Slowly, painfully, she recovered some of her strength, though she never fully regained what she had lost. They adjusted to their new limitations, helping each other through each day. Thomas had long since taken over full management of the ranch, allowing his parents to live in comfortable retirement. The house was modified to make things easier, a bedroom added to the main floor so Zelda would not have to manage stairs. On a warm spring evening in 1931, 52 years after Zelda had first arrived in Alpine, she and Quincy sat on their porch, wrapped in blankets despite the mild temperature. They were both 75 now, their bodies worn but their minds still sharp. "You remember that first meal we shared?" Quincy asked. "The stew and bread. I remember thinking I had never tasted anything so delicious," Zelda replied. "After months of cold meals and restaurant food, having a real home-cooked dinner was like a dream." "I was so nervous," he admitted. "I wanted to impress you, wanted you to think you had made the right choice in coming. I knew I had made the right choice the moment you laughed when I confessed I could not cook. You could have been angry or disappointed, but instead you laughed and offered a solution. That was when I started to think maybe, just maybe, things would work out." They sat quietly, holding hands, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The ranch stretched out before them, a testament to their years of hard work. In the distance, they could see Thomas riding in with several ranch hands, the daily work never quite done. "It is a good legacy," Quincy said softly. "Not just the ranch, but the family. Our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they are all good people, hard-working kind." "We did well, you and I." "We did," Zelda agreed. "Together, we did very well indeed." As the stars began to emerge one by one, they remained on the porch, treasuring these quiet moments together. They had been blessed with a long life, a strong love, and a family that would carry on after they were gone. Whatever time remained, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together. The seasons turned, bringing them to their 53rd anniversary. The celebration was quieter this time, just immediate family, as both Quincy and Zelda tired easily now. But it was no less filled with love. Their children told stories, their grandchildren performed songs and skits, and their great-grandchildren, too young to understand but eager to participate, added their own chaos to the gathering. That night, lying in bed, Zelda turned to Quincy. "I want you to know if I had it to do all over again, I would not change a thing. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose it all again if it meant spending my life with you." "Same here," he said, pulling her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zelda Patterson." A lonely cowboy's greatest blessing. They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done thousands of times before, secure in a love that had stood the test of time. Quincy passed away peacefully in his sleep one night in early autumn, just shy of their 54th anniversary. He was 77 years old and had lived to see his ranch prosper, his family flourish, and his beloved wife remain by his side for over half a century. Zelda grieved deeply, as did the entire family. The funeral was attended by hundreds, people from all over the region who had known and respected Quincy Patterson. As she stood by his grave, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Zelda felt the weight of his loss, but also the warmth of gratitude. She had been blessed beyond measure, given a love she had not known to hope for when she stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago. She remained at the ranch, cared for by family, spending her days sewing, reading, and telling stories to the youngest generation. She spoke often of Quincy, keeping his memory alive, sharing the lessons they had learned together. The secret to a good marriage, she told a granddaughter who was preparing for her own wedding, is not about being perfect or having no flaws. It is about finding someone who loves you despite your imperfections, who sees your weaknesses and helps you compensate for them rather than punishing you for them. Your grandfather never once made me feel bad about not being able to cook. Instead, he found a way to make it work, to build a partnership where we each contributed what we could. That is what love is, adapting and supporting and growing together. Zelda lived another 3 years, long enough to see another great-grandchild born, long enough to know that the legacy she and Quincy had built would continue. She passed away peacefully one spring morning, the window open to let in the breeze, the sound of birds singing their dawn chorus. She was buried beside Quincy, their graves overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone reads simply, "Zelda and Quincy Patterson, partners in life and love forever." At the funeral, Thomas spoke of his parents' remarkable partnership, of how they had shown their entire family what real love looked like. "My father used to say that the best day of his life was when my mother stepped off that stagecoach and into his world," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "And my mother always said that confessing she could not cook was the scariest moment of her life, but that my father's laughter in response was the moment she started to believe in happy endings. They gave us all that same gift, the belief that love is real, that partnerships can work, that happy endings are possible if you are willing to work for them." The Patterson Ranch continued to prosper under Thomas's management and eventually passed to his own children. But the story of Quincy and Zelda lived on, told and retold through generations. The tale of the mail-order bride who could not cook and the cowboy who could, who had built a love that lasted a lifetime, became family legend. In the main house, now occupied by the 4th generation of Pattersons, a framed letter hung on the wall. It was one of the early letters between Quincy and Zelda, carefully preserved. Beside it hung their wedding photograph, 2 young people staring solemnly at the camera, unaware of the extraordinary life that awaited them. And in the kitchen, that same kitchen where Quincy had prepared thousands of meals over the years, his recipes were still used. His stew recipe, his bread recipe, his biscuits, all carefully written down and passed from generation to generation. The family joke remained that none of the women descended from Zelda could cook worth a damn, though this was more legend than fact at this point. But they told the story anyway, keeping alive the memory of an unconventional partnership that had worked perfectly because 2 people had chosen to make it work. The ranch stood as a monument to what Quincy and Zelda had built together, but their true legacy was in the descendants who filled it, carrying forward the lessons of love, partnership, and acceptance that their remarkable marriage had taught. They had proven that a happy ending did not require perfection, just 2 people willing to laugh at their imperfections and support each other through everything life brought. And somewhere, perhaps in whatever comes after this life, Quincy and Zelda were together still, holding hands, sharing stories, and laughing about the day she confessed she could not cook and he replied that it was a good thing he could. Because some loves are too strong to be bound by time or mortality, some partnerships too perfect to ever truly end.